Find out the source of this man's strength and we'll pay you. He had strength in his hands. He probably just did all kinds of hand stuff. This story is so dark I could almost cry telling it. Hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel for part 5 of the Women in the Bible series. I broke this part off of part 4 because originally the last 3 women that I'm talking about today were going to be in that video, but I didn't want it to be too long, and I realized this next story with Samson and even the next one after that are pretty lengthy. Hope you are interested in learning more about Samson's mother, Delilah, and then the Levite's concubine. And that is such a dark story, but I'll get there. Where we left off in part 4 was in Judges, and we're in Judges still because Samson was used as a way to help with the Philistine oppressors. So the Philistines are oppressing Israel at this time after Deborah and different things happened. So we left off with Deborah. A few different things occurred in between there, but again, I'm not getting into all those specifics. Samson is born to a couple, Manoah and his wife. So we never learn about what Samson's mother's name is, which is interesting because she's pretty vital to the story. And even like I mentioned in part 4, we learn about a woman named Acsah, and then there's really nothing to her story, but a woman who has this integral part in history is not named. Manoah is a Danite. He's an Israelite, and he's married to a woman, and they don't have any children. His wife is barren, and at some point later on, an angel of the Lord appears to the woman and lets her know that she's going to have a son. And there are some requirements to him because he's supposed to be consecrated or set apart unto God for a special purpose. He would be dedicated to God as a Nazirite. So the angel of the Lord told the woman she couldn't drink any wine or any other alcoholic beverages, and she wasn't to eat any forbidden or unclean foods. And she was also advised that once the child was born, that because he was going to be dedicated as a Nazirite, no razor should touch his head. His hair should not be cut. Those were the requirements, and the woman listened, heard everything, and she went and told her husband what happened. She said she didn't ask him his name or anything, and also that he didn't offer his name, but she did tell her husband that the person she was talking to had a countenance like an angel, though she didn't exactly know who she was talking to. Her husband wanted the angel to come back, so he prayed to God and asked that the man be sent to them again to give them further instructions on how to raise their son. And that's exactly what happened. So at some point, the woman was out in the field, the angel returned unto her, and her husband again wasn't there, so she went and got him. She got her husband, he came out to the field. Manoah asked the man, "Were you the same man that was here previously speaking to my wife?" And the man confirmed, "Yes, that was me." And he was talking to the angel, asking him like, what should we do with our son? And the angel is like, I told her what the requirements are. As long as she follows these rules, everything will be fine. Don't drink any wine, don't drink any alcoholic beverages, and stay away from unclean forbidden foods. Do not eat those. Your son will be dedicated to the Lord as a Nazirite. And that was it. Manoah says that he wants to have some food. He wants to offer a sacrifice as well. And he asked that the angel stay. And the angel told him, you can make the food and I'll stay, but I'm not going to eat. And he also lets him know, and if you're going to make a sacrifice, make sure that it's unto God. He didn't want the man to kind of like do any sacrificing for him. He wanted it all the glory to go to God. Manoah even went on to ask him his name, but the man told Manoah that he couldn't say what his name was. And in the King James Version, it mentions that it's a secret. And in the New Living Translation, which is the one I reviewed more, said that his name was too wonderful to tell him. Manoah, he prepared the meal, and then he made a fire. When the fire went up, the angel of the Lord ascended into the fire. And so at that point, Manoah and his wife knew that this was an angel, a supreme being, and they fell to the ground on their faces. And then Manoah was all scared. He was saying, "Oh, we're going to die. We're surely going to die because we looked at God. We saw God, and we can't, nobody can look at God and live." His wife reassured him like, "Honey, we'll be fine. If God did want to take us out, he wouldn't have accepted our sacrifice. He wouldn't have shown us these miraculous things, and he wouldn't have told us these miraculous things to come." She put him at ease. And time went on. The woman did go on to have a son. She named him Samson. And the Lord blessed Samson as he was growing up. And when he became a man, he saw a woman, and she happened to be a Philistine. And Samson wanted her to be his wife. His parents were upset because they wanted him to be with a woman from their family, from their tribe. But he wanted this Philistine woman, and he told his parents, his father, go get her for me. I want her. It even said that he says, she looks good to me. He was insistent on this woman. He demanded that he have her. And his parents, of course, wouldn't have known this, but it was actually God's plan for this to happen, because this was going to be a way that the Israelites could conquer the Philistines in some way. Samson and his parents traveled down to Timnah because that's where the woman was from. And as they were traveling down, a lion attacked. The Spirit of the Lord came upon Samson, and he was able to kill the lion with his bare hands by ripping its jawbone apart, and then left the lion there to just rot. His parents must have been in another area because his parents didn't know that that happened. And they traveled on down. Samson met up with the woman, talked to her for a while, and he confirmed that he still was interested. He liked her, and that was that. A little bit later, time had passed a little. I don't really know exactly how much time went by, but they were on their way back to Timnah, Samson and his parents, for the wedding to take place. So as they're traveling down, it must have been the same pathway or the same route, because Samson took a little detour and went over to see the carcass of the lion that he had killed. And when he checked on it, he saw that there was a swarm of bees around the carcass, and there was honey in there. I've heard that he shouldn't have done this because being a Nazirite, he's not supposed to eat things from, obviously, from like a body of a creature. So he scoops up some honey, he eats it, gives it to his parents. He did not tell them where it came from. So he ate the honey and shared it with them. They ate honey from the carcass of a dead lion. That couldn't have been good, but... So they get down to Timnah. Samson throws a big party, a wedding celebration, and it was going to last for about 7 days. And when Samson got there, the woman's parents gave him 30 young men to be his companions, I guess, to like hang out with them and try to get, to combine the families or whatever. And Samson decided to play a little trick with them. So he posed a riddle, and the riddle had something to do with the lion and the honey. I'll put the exact riddle on the screen. But he posed this riddle to them, and he said, if you can solve this riddle within the 7 days before the party ends, I will give you 30 fine linen robes and 30 sets of festive clothing. And he said, but if you can't solve the riddle within the 7 days, then you have to give me 30 fine robes and 30 sets of fine linen. Time was going on. The men could not figure out the riddle. By the 4th day, they wanted an answer. They must have been getting nervous that they were going to have to go out and find these 30 fine linen robes and the 30 sets of festive clothing, and that would have set them back. Who's going to be paying for all of this? So they approached the wife, the new wife, and they said to her, find out the answer to this riddle for us. Ask your husband about this riddle, get the answer, and if you don't, we're going to burn down your father's house with you in it. And they're like, did you bring us here to make us poor? Because if they couldn't solve the riddle, that's pretty much what was going to happen. They were going to have to go out and buy all these items to pay for the bet. The woman goes to Samson and she asks him to tell her the answer to the riddle. And he says to her, why should I tell you? I haven't even told my parents what the answer to the riddle is. And she's like, well, you hate me. You don't love me. If you loved me, you would tell me the answer. And he didn't want to tell her. So she starts to nag him. She's sitting around crying every day. She's with him. She's crying because he hasn't told her the answer to the riddle. So by day 7, Samson breaks. He gives in and he just tells her the answer. And then, of course, the woman goes and tells the man the answer. And they go back and tell Samson the answer too. And it's literally like on the 7th day, right at the moment that they would have lost. And then Samson now has to pay up. He's upset anyway because he knows where they got the answer from. And he's quoted in the New Living Translation as saying, if you hadn't plowed with my heifer, you wouldn't have solved my riddle. Anyway, Samson goes down to the town of Ashkelon and he just slaughters 30 men and takes their garments and then brings that back to the 30 men that were in his bridal party or his companions and gives the clothing that he just stole. And that was his payment for the bet. And all of this makes Samson so mad that he left and went back to his father's house. And I guess he needed to just cool off, but he was there for a little while. And then after some time went by, he decides he wants to go back to be with his wife. So he goes back down there, but little did he know that the woman's father gave her to the man who was the best man in the wedding. And the New Living Translation refers to him as the best man. Either way, the father gave his daughter, Samson's new wife, to another man because Samson abandoned her. And then here comes Samson bringing a little peace offering and trying to be with her. And when he gets there, her father will not allow it. The father told Samson, well, I assumed you hated her, so I gave her to another man. He's like, look, here is her younger sister. She's even more beautiful than her. Take her as a wife. Samson wasn't having it. So he gathered 300 foxes. Now he wants to get back at the Philistines in general. He gets 300 foxes and he paired them up and he ties 2 tails together. And inside the tails, he put a torch. And he lit the torch and he let the foxes go running into the fields of the Philistines. And the fire, of course, destroyed everything, burned up their crops, all their corn, their vineyards, and their olive groves. And the Philistines found all their crops burned up and they're like, who did this? And then people knew who it was. So they're like, oh, it was Samson. And he did it because his father-in-law gave his wife to his best man to be married. And the people were like, okay, well, this is what we're going to do now. They went and got Samson's wife and her father and they burned them. And when Samson found that out, he was hot yet again. And he just went on like a KILLING spree. And I'm spelling it for YouTube purposes. I don't know if it's going to flag me for saying all these words like I said before. Yeah, so he went on a little spree, did this, and all, well, he probably didn't do this because he had strength in his hands. He probably just did all kinds of hand stuff on the Philistines and took them out. A whole bunch of them gone. And that's the story about all that Samson was into with his wife. And then he's like on the run and the Philistines want to get him. And there's a lot of things going on there. Later, Samson gets with a prostitute. She happens to be in Gaza. So it's evident that Samson has a soft spot for Philistine women. Or you could even just say women that he's technically not supposed to be with, because the Philistines were the enemy of the Israelites. And yet he was falling victim to them. And then Delilah, here she comes. He falls in love with Delilah after a while. And the Philistines, of course, know that Samson has this superhuman strength. And they want to know what's making him this strong. They get with Delilah because they know that he likes her. And they tell her, find out the source of this man's strength and we'll pay you so we can capture him. I don't know how many of the Philistines approached her with this, but they said they would each give her 1,100 pieces of silver if she were to comply with their request. And she did. It didn't say how she felt about Samson, but we already know that he was in love with her. So either way, she was down. She was gonna set him up. In the midst of their interactions, she asked Samson, like, what is the source of your strength? How are you strong? And she point blank asks him, what would it take to tie you up securely? And he responds and tells her, if I were to be tied up with 7 new bowstrings that have not been dried, I will become as weak as anyone else. So this woman ties him up. He must be in her house. She has the Philistines hiding in some of the inner rooms in the house. They're ready to come and get him should this work. She ties him up with 7 bowstrings and then she yells out, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. They're attacking. He snaps the bowstrings. That failed. Now, it never says if the Philistines actually come out, which is what I'm thinking, that they don't actually appear, that she's kind of like making this as a joke. Because at first I'm like, if the Philistines are jumping out every time she says they're attacking and he sees them like trying to get them, why would he be dumb enough to tell her again? Because he does tell her again. But I'm thinking they're just waiting. But as soon as she says it, she probably is laughing like, ah, ha, ha. No, they're not really here. When he breaks from the bowstrings and she's like, oh, you're making fun of me. You're lying to me because I want to know the source of your strength. And you told me that and it's not true. What is the source of your strength? He tells her another thing. He says, if I were to be tied up with brand new ropes that have never been used, I will be as weak as anyone else. So of course, same thing plays out. She has the Philistines hiding in some inner rooms. She ties them up with the new ropes. She yells, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He jumps up, snaps the ropes. And that's it. Now she's pouting again. You hate me. You're making fun of me. You're lying to me. You won't tell me the real source of your strength. And she asks him again for the third time, what is the source of your strength? I want to know, like, what makes you so strong? And now this one is a little more complicated. I'm going to see if I can get it right. But he says, if you tie the 7 locks of my hair into some fabric on your loom and then tighten it with the loom shuttle, I'll be as weak as anyone else. Now, I don't know what any of that means. I'm assuming it has to do with some kind of sewing machine type mechanism. And maybe if his hair were to be intertwined in that and then that machine tightened while he's asleep, she does just that, weaves the fabric into his hair, puts it through the loom, tightens it with the loom shuttle, and then she yells out the same thing. The Philistines are upon you. Again, nothing. Because she did this last one while he was asleep, I can only assume she did the first 2 while he was asleep as well. Once again, same thing. She cries. She wants to know what is the source of his strength. And then she puts him on a similar guilt trip that his wife put him through, where she's like, you won't tell me the riddle. You say you love me, but you really hate me because you won't tell me the answer to your riddle. And Delilah starts doing pretty much the same thing. You say you love me, but you won't tell me this. You've lied to me 3 times. How can you say you love me if you're keeping secrets from me? You're making fun of me. You're lying to me. And he's not telling her. But then days go by, day after day after day. She's crying, nagging him with this question, and it's tormenting. She torments him where he finally breaks and he tells her. He says, my hair has never been cut. I'm a Nazarite dedicated to God. If my head were to be shaved, my strength would leave me. And at that moment, she realized she got him. She knew that he finally told her the truth. She went and told the Philistines, he finally told me the real source of his strength. You must come now. This is it. And this time when the Philistines show up, it even describes that they had their money in their hands. So this is how sure they all were that she had finally gotten the real answer. She has Samson in her home. She lulls him to sleep in her lap. And then she calls a man out and he shaves Samson's head. Once his head is shaved, she yells out like she did before, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. And in his mind, he was going to do just like he did before. But when he gets up this time, he's just as weak as anyone else. And they tie him up and they capture him and they take him off and they have him. And they also gouged out his eyes and put him into prison. And then some other things happen with Samson in prison. He ends up avenging himself in a way. That's all detailed there. His hair starts to grow back and he prays to God to give him strength one last time. And then that does happen. And he has his final victory, but he also dies in the process. But of course, that's in the book of Judges. So I'm not getting into those details because Delilah's part of the story has ended there. We don't hear about her again. The last woman that I'm going to talk about today, as I mentioned, this story is so dark that I could almost cry telling it. There's a man who is in the tribe of the Levites. He had a concubine. He's from Ephraim. He met a woman who was from Bethlehem in Judah. And he took her to his house to be one of his wives, or she's referred to as the concubine throughout the story. So that's how I'm going to reference her because we never learn his name or her name. This man lives in a very remote area of Ephraim. He's in the hill country somewhere, and his wife got mad at him one day and she went back home to her father's house. And again, that was in Bethlehem. About 4 months later, the man decides he wants to try to reconcile with his wife, and he goes to her house, her father's house, to try to win her back. And he brings with him his servant and 2 donkeys, and he's there to bring her home. I'm just going to call him E because he's from Ephraim. And I'm just going to call her the concubine. Yeah. So E arrives and the concubine's father invites them to stay. Says, you know, stay for a little while. And then after some days go by, the man is ready to go home. E is ready to take his wife and the servant and go back to the hill country. And her father kind of convinces him to stay. He's like, oh, don't go. Let's have a meal first and then you can go. So they eat and then E is trying to go. The father says, no, just stay one more night and you can leave. He probably doesn't really want to do it, but E decides to just stay for the extra night. And on the 5th day, once again, he's trying to leave. The father is saying, oh no, just stay, have a meal. He says he has the meal, and then the father tries it one more time. Just stay one more night. And so the guy's like, no, we're gone. They're traveling now back to where he's from. It's late. The servant suggests that they stop and rest in a Jebusite town. But because E is an Israelite, he feels more comfortable if they stay in Gibeah or Ramah. And that's what they do. So as they're traveling a little bit further along, they stay in Gibeah, which is located in Benjamin. He's assuming these are Israelite people. They'll receive me well and will be safe here. They go to the town and they're resting in the town square, and it's probably not the safest place to be, but nobody has invited them to their house. So they're just there resting. And then after some time goes by, an old man comes by. He's coming home from the fields and he stops and he's talking to E, and he's asking him who he is and where he's from, where he's going. And E tells him where he lives and why he's out there and what he's doing. And then E tells him, you know, we've just been out here. Nobody has invited us to stay with them. So the old man invites them all to come back to his house and stay. So they get there, they start getting settled in, and just as they're settling in, a crowd swarms the house, basically. They're outside the house, they have the house surrounded, and then they start beating on the door, telling the old man to send out the man that, you know, that just came over to your house. Send him out so that we can know him. Now this story is just like what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah in one of the previous parts. I believe it was part 1. Same scenario where, you know, they're asking to send the men out. We want to know him. And so the old man goes out, steps outside the door, and he says, no, don't do this evil thing. This is a guest in my house. Don't do this. It's a shameful thing. He offers, just like Lot, offers his virgin daughter and the concubine to these men and says, take them and you can do whatever you want with them. Really? But the men don't want that. They want the man in the house. So then E grabs his concubine and pushes her out the door to these men. And they take her and they do stuff to her. They abuse this woman all night until the next morning. At dawn, they let her go. And at daybreak, she's walking, crawling, whatever way she's getting there, back to this house, and she collapses at the doorstep. She's not alive at this point. E comes to the door, opens it, sees her there, tries to get her up. She's not getting up. He takes her body, puts it on his donkey, and brings it home. Once he gets home, this man takes a knife and uses it and makes 12 pieces of her body, and he sends them out to all the 12 tribes of Israel. And this is supposed to be a message to them, as far as I know. Like, look at what our people did. Look at what Israel did to Israel. People of Israel are like, what are we going to do? We have to do something about this. No crime like this has ever been committed since we left Egypt. And that's the end of this woman's story. And I'm sorry to end this one on such a sad note. I'm ending it here. And it's, you know, the Bible just has so much in it. It's, many people call it a bloody book, and it really is. There's a lot of blood, a lot of bloodshed. And and these are just the things that are in it, and I'm sharing those. So I hope you keep watching for part 6 that will be coming up. I hope you're enjoying the series. I hope you go back and watch any that you might have missed. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in the next one.